Welcome to episode 5. Now, this episode started with the question of what do I do when I walk into a theater and I see a mixing board like this? Now, obviously, if you're not a sound person, your first inclination is to maybe become a little bit intimidated by the fact that there's a lot of knobs. It's really unlikely that you're going to see a mixing board like this, but this is a real world example. um, the most important thing to realize with a mixer is that it really only does three things. It makes signals louder, it makes them better, and then it sends them places. So we should probably first go over what exactly constitutes sound. So when somebody talks, blah, 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 the air molecules around their mouth wiggle back and forth, blah, 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 wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. And the air molecules then wiggle their neighbor air molecules until it gets to your head. And then they wiggle the air molecules around your ears. And your ears are just these amazing freaking devices for figuring out and translating that into what we perceive as sound. So then some genius thought, wait a minute, if sound is really just these air molecules wiggling back and forth, I bet there's a way to record this. And there is. And that is what makes basically our whole job exist. So microphones, by and large, are designed to respond to the wiggling of air molecules. And then they turn this into an electrical signal. Now, the first thing about this is that microphones tend to put out a very, very weak signal. We're talking in the microvolts range. Microvolts. For most of our electronics to work, they have to be way up in the millivolts region. So the very first thing that a mixing board does with a microphone signal is to make it louder. And there's a preamp section on most channels of most mixing boards. Now you'll note that the need to bring the volume essentially up is restricted to microphones. You don't actually need to be able to do it with line level sources, which are already kind of loud. So things like CD players, computers with sound cards, even the meager output of your your Macintosh computer's headphone output don't really need to be brought up that much, but sometimes you end up going through the microphone preamp circuitry anyway. Some boards, different boards have different ways of dealing with it. Some you really can't avoid the preamp at all. Looking at you, Midas. But most of the time there's a way to select what you're doing. You're going to have a phantom power switch on the mixing board because many microphones, like this one, require a little bit of voltage along one of the pins. And I forget what the standard is, and it doesn't matter what the standard is because certain microphone manufacturers, and namely this Russian manufacturer, ignore the standard. In any case, there might be a switch to apply phantom power. There might be a pad, and then there will be a knob that will adjust how loud things are when they, at the very first stage of the mixing board. And this is true whether you've got like a $200 mixing board or a several $100,000 mixing board. The next stage typically is what I am sort of facetiously calling the make it better stage. Most mixing boards, that means that there's an EQ section on most live sound consoles. So what have we done here? We've made the signal louder, and we've made it what we laughingly call better. And now we get to send it to different places. So this particular mixer is actually a monitor mixer. It has a whole bunch of different mixes that it can send out. It can send the signal that comes into any channel to one of 16 or 20 about different outputs. Now, why would you want this? Well, if you're running a show where you have a whole lot of different places that you want sound to go, if you're doing things like you've got a whole bunch of speakers all around the place, but those different speakers want to have slightly different sounds going to them, or sometimes entirely different sounds, that might be very useful. This particular mixer is actually designed for the case of if you've got like a band and say there's 8 or 12 people in the band and they all want to listen to different stuff. So basically, your 3 things: make it louder, make it better, send it places. And that's all that's going to happen on any mixing board you're going to use. That's really what it does.